When you hear the phrase soft as steel, what do you think of? While the word steel might conjure up images such as massive high-rise buildings, where does the soft part come in? And what exactly does this mean in our work and in our lives? Welcome to the Soft as Steel podcast with your host, Dennis Duran, featuring engaging conversations with a wide range of industry leaders around soft skills, how we practice love, inclusion, social justice, and compassionate leadership that's everlasting in the workplace. And now, here's Dennis Duran.
My guest today is Glodean Champion. Glodean is a speaker, author, leadership coach, diversity and inclusion facilitator. And what else, Glodean? Is that the whole list, or are there more things we need to add in here? In short, Glodean serves society in so many different ways. She helps organizations empower their people by teaching them how to raise their awareness, own their belonging, and collaborate in a way that creates innovative, influential teams in a culture people love. Recently, she became the Chief Business Development Officer for Tilt 365. We'll likely learn a bit more about that new platform during our conversation. I've known Glodean for several years, and we have something of a very proper, very deep love affair based on a wide range of shared values and beliefs that are the foundation of our work, carrying messages about love, inclusion, social justice, and leadership wherever we go. I think she's a miracle. She touches people in so many different ways with a mild touch, a gentle stroke, and when needed, a sledgehammer. Figuratively speaking, of course. Glodean, welcome.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Yeah, well, maybe I've found a new career path. I can write introductions for people. I don't know.
Right. But, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Soft as Steel, Glodean, I know you've read my book. You've heard me talk. You know what I'm all about. You know that even though all of my experiences in the construction industry, virtually everything I talk about has to do with people. Mm-hmm. And we both know that regardless of the industry that we're talking about or society in general, life and business is about people and relationships, people getting to know each other and building those relationships over time. And there are opportunities everywhere. They abound on a day-to-day basis, but there are also obstacles and hurdles. And so, one of my interests is to hear your thoughts on a number of things that relate to the things that you and I share in value, starting with the role and the meaning and the value of accepting a four-letter word as a key ingredient in how we go about our daily lives, and that word is love. So let's start right there. What's the role of love in life?
So this is great that we're having this conversation right now, because I was watching the movie The Village. Have you seen that movie by M. Night Shyamalan?
No, but I will now.
It's really interesting. It's slow, but it's slow by intention. Mm-hmm. And one of the lines in the movie was, "The world moves for love. It kneels before it in awe." I mean, it was in reference to something else, but I feel like by it stands on its own. I had never heard love described so beautifully and powerfully, because it to me says that in the face of no matter what, love moves the world. In the face of fear, in the face of where we are right now, in a bit of divisiveness in this country, love is going to be the thing that moves us to connection. Like, I firmly believe that. I don't believe that the majority of people in this country don't understand the importance of connection. I think we all want it in some aspect or not. And it filters into the workplace. Like, I'm a firm believer that there is no business self and home self. Like, the things that we're doing in business, the work that we're doing in the corporate world should filter out into the community, into people's homes, right? You can't be a leader that focuses on love in the office and then goes home and is a tyrant in your family. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. So let's focus in on the business world. Our good and mutual friend Steve Farber wrote a book entitled "Love is Just Damn Good Business." my conversation with him was very interesting about love, and again, hearing his view of it, the importance of it, and again, just the recognition that without and I love your word connection. Connection takes the idea of relationship building to a bit of a higher plane, in a way, a place that a lot of people are not necessarily comfortable with. It's why, in my view, and again, I know you know something about the construction industry because you live someplace it was built. I'm fairly certain of that. And you've seen tower cranes, and you've seen cones in the street, and you've seen all kinds of things. So construction and building is something that people know something about, even in the most general sense. And so when you talk about connection, and you say that to someone who wears steel-toed boots and a hard hat, they want to take their own life, and I don't mean that literally, but the idea of I got a job to do here. Yeah, and I know I got to get along with you since you're the project manager. I got to get along with this person, Glodean, who's coming in to teach a diversity and inclusion workshop or something. But connection, I ain't going there. How do you deal with that?
So I would say to that person, you need connection more than anything, because you're basically putting your life at risk. Wouldn't you want to be connected to the person that is responsible for that crane, that is bringing that steel, the steel girder that could knock you off of the frame that you on? Mm-hmm. Or don't you want to make sure that if something happens to you and you're working on a high rise, that the people that are working around you have your back? And that doesn't happen when they kind of know you or they kind of care about you. It happens when they're connected to you. Mm-hmm. That's just, I don't understand why it's so hard for people, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that most people look at change as something scary, right? They don't see it as an opportunity to learn and grow. So that particular construction worker, I would help them see that there's so much opportunity in the space of connection for them to learn and grow and be a better team member.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the elements of what connection's all about? What constitutes connection?
So I've redefined that, the ABCs of love, as I call them. So when one is able to own for one, start with awareness. When one is able to recognize themselves, like to be self-aware, right? So they know how they show up in different spaces. They recognize when they're being triggered, because I think that's usually what happens when we go sideways, right? We get triggered by something and we're not aware that we've been triggered, and then we react to it. And now both people are talking at each other instead of to each other. So just recognizing somebody just said something that made me feel uncomfortable. All right, I feel uncomfortable right now. Let me figure out another way to approach this so I can move through that discomfort. If you can own your belonging, I mean, you've heard me talk about my mom and the amazing job that she did raising me, but the very first, I feel like my earliest memories of my mother were being in restaurants and places where we were the only Black people. And her primary goal was to get me to be comfortable in those spaces and to understand that I belong anywhere that I either want to be or can afford to be, and to recognize that our money spends green just like everyone else's. So she took the thing that most people are uncomfortable with when you grow up, in a segregated community. My mother made sure I didn't have that either. We lived on a block that had, I call it the United Nations of Linwood, because there were a representation of basically around the world on a 2-block radius around my house. So if you can be aware not only of self, but situationally, so you're aware of what's going on in the space around you. You're aware when you're in group environments, not only how you're showing up, but maybe how you're affecting other people. And then you can be in that space knowing that you belong there, no matter how somebody else may be trying to treat you, because that's what it is, right? People cannot make you feel some way. That was another thing my mother taught me. You buy into it because there's some level of lack of self-esteem or confidence that you're carrying, but the only person that can make you feel like you don't belong is you. So if people can get through those two things, connection happens automatically, right? Because now we're open. We can have a conversation. We can be honest with each other. There's no fear that, you're going to treat me differently because I said something that you didn't like. You're going to figure out a way to help me understand that what I said wasn't cool. And we're going to figure out a way to work through this together. Because at the end of the day, and this is kind of where I am with all of this. At the end of the day, when something happens in this country, mass shooting, police brutality, 9/11, I think we're coming up on the anniversary of 9/11. When things like that happen in this country, people come together no matter what creed or color they are, right? We have a common cause that we're coming together for. So what if we could just do that without having some catastrophe be the impetus to bring us together?
Yes.
That was a long answer to your question, but
well, yeah, we have time. We have time. There's no, we're and I know the listeners are going to be enjoying listening to people like you and Steve and others rather than listening to me. But so let me connect a number of your thoughts to this whole notion of why I wrote a book about people's qualities and the importance of those in leadership and building relationships. And I use the analogy of steel being important to the long life of a building, just as, in my view, a person's qualities demonstrated through their words and actions are what helps them to build successful relationships, to make connections. And if they do that without any fear over time, they will also enjoy happiness. What's wrong with anything I've said, or what do you think?
There's nothing wrong with that. I think that the thing that we need to really encourage people to move out of is fear, right? It's the unknown, it's the unfamiliar. But again, I feel like I keep quoting my mother these days, but probably because I'm working on a memoir, her story, my story, the things she taught me. But fear can only hurt us if we allow it to. I mean, it's getting in the way of things, right? But the question is, what are you afraid of? Like when you ask, I was at an event the other day having a conversation with people, and I think I told you I drove cross country and talked to people about love all the way to the South. I almost made it to you, and not one person turned me away. I was in the South, I drove cross country with the fear that, Black people were in harm's way. Like, what kind of craziness am I thinking to drive by myself from California to the South? But talking to people about love along that journey helped me see that the only thing that would have stood in my way and the only thing that would have let that fear control me was if I didn't step into it, right? So I just think for every time I've been in a situation where I was afraid to do something, doing it showed me that it's not going to kill me. I mean, okay, yeah, if I'm afraid to jump off the side of a building or a mountain without any protection, well, yeah, that would kill me. But short of that, if I know that I'm really not putting myself or anyone else in harm's way, the thing to do is to step into it. And what is one of the definitions of love but courage, right? So it takes courage to move through the fear. So I think that's the only differentiator in what you said, or only thing that's standing in the way of love for a lot of people is fear. But there's nothing to be afraid of. So,
and again, I'm gonna connect this back to the construction industry. Although I think you and actually many other people have pointed out to me that everything that I talked about in my book, if you just changed a few words and maybe a couple of stories, it applies to every sector of our economy. It's not just a construction industry thing. But if you do connect to the construction, we're talking about fear. and you're talking to that hard-nosed project manager who spends their days, and I'll say it differently, who spends his days, because for the most part, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
The construction industry, which I've been in for over 40 years, and others, is still very, very not only male, but white male dominated.
Yeah.
So, so if you're talking to one of those guys, I'm pointing at myself right now. If you're talking to one of those guys, what do you mean? What are you talking about fear? What are you talking about love? I'm not afraid of anything. I wear my PPE, my safety stuff. I got it all on. I'm fine. What is this fear thing you're talking about?
This is funny. Okay, so I spent a lot of years, probably 20 plus years in IT, also white male dominated, especially when I was hands-on, right? So I think part of this, even this conversation, like being able to speak to someone like that, I want to say like you, since you pointed at you, is the fear to be able to speak truth. Because here's what I have learned in my career. People are more willing to accept the truth if you can say it in a way that helps them understand that you mean no harm to them, right? My mother used to say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So if I was trying to get you to move through a space of fear, and let's say we were working together on a team and there was someone on the team that you were having a problem with, my first question would be, what is the problem? Right? Like, without placing blame, because this is how we don't get people to open up. What problem are you having with this person? And usually it doesn't even have anything to do with the other person. Again, going back to self-awareness, if I'm working with someone, and I'll just use myself as an example, when I was working in IT and I was working with a lot of white guys, they would give me the really crappy jobs, the ones that nobody could figure out. And I used to go home in tears and tell my husband how they were making my life miserable. And he would say, they're making you a better tech. Because don't you always fix the problem? And I said, yeah. So he said, why are you getting upset? They're making you a better engineer. So in this instance, I would just say that helping people see that you're creating a problem with someone who really doesn't have any ill will toward you. But the thing that you're having the problem with doesn't have anything to do with them. It has everything to do with you. So the question now becomes, how do I help you move through this so that you all can work together? Because again, we go back to, if we're working on the highway or construction is a dangerous job, right? Doesn't matter where you are. There is a level of danger that is associated with the work that you're doing. And if I am afraid that you don't have my back, because we have some stupid beef, that's not going to move either one of us forward and could potentially put one of our lives in danger. So again, I go back to we should care about the fact that you could potentially put someone in harm's way. And so let's figure out a way to work through whatever nonsense I call fear nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just a note to listeners. Glodean and I are talking about these topics and these important ideas with the backdrop of the construction industry. So some of you may be listening to this saying, well, if you're not in construction, what does it have to do with me? What does any of this have to do with me? And I'll jump in with the first thought about an answer. And the short answer is everything. And the bad news that follows is that when you Glodean, use a term like self-awareness, being aware of self, some people frankly don't really know what that means. They don't know. Does it mean that I notice if I've got a stain on my shirt, if I notice that my glasses are dirty? So what part of who we are does this self-awareness help us with?
Let's see the best way I can explain this. Oh, okay. So self-awareness is recognizing how you may be affecting other people. When you can take you out of the situation, let's say that you're in a situation and you're a leader and you bark an order at your employee, and that employee visibly responds in some, shakes or frowns or flinches, that's an indication that you said something or did something that affected that person. And here's the other thing about self-awareness. It starts inside of you first. I believe that we are designed to be loving beings, right? That we are designed to take care of one another. So when we do something that's not cool, something that is hurtful to someone else, we feel it inside of us first. It might be a twinge in our stomach. It might be something in our chest, but there's something that happens inside of us that for even a brief moment, if we are aware of it, is saying that wasn't good, what you just did. Mm-hmm. There have been times I would like to say that I'm usually upbeat and chipper all the time, but there are times when I'm not in the mood for certain behavior, and I'm not quite this way anymore. I used to be this way, where somebody would say something that I didn't like or do something that I didn't like, and I would say something that was rude or hurtful, and but I felt it. My stomach would not, or I felt that what I did wasn't cool, but I had to grapple with myself. Like, is it that serious? Do I care? No, I don't. That's for the other person to deal with. And that's where self-awareness begins. Because when you start having those conversations in your head, then you're not caring about other people, and it's not about us, right? It's not about me. I'm having a bad day. Why is my day more important than somebody else's? So why would I make somebody else feel bad because I'm having a bad day? Mm-hmm. So again, it starts with inside of you, and then recognizing how you are affecting someone else.
Yeah. And it also, again, this issue of who we are and how we are with people in our lives. So, I talk about this idea that being able to do the job. The job is trainer, educator, chemist, construction manager, whatever the job is. Being able to do the job is obviously important. So there's a job description, there's accountabilities, et cetera, and this is what you're supposed to do. But how you do the job speaks to the need to be aware of yourself in the way you're talking about it, and to recognize. And this is kind of a fun thing that every one of these conversations are going to include a number of the same elements, because I feel that the conversation we're having right now. And again, this is a term that I learned in connection with social media and podcasting, that the content will be evergreen. And to me, that means that what we're talking about is stuff that people may still be talking about in the same manner we're talking about it today, 1, 2, 5, and 10 years from now. I hope to high heaven that's not the case, particularly about some of these things.
Yes.
But it's just like even in the world of IT, change is the trite term is change is constant. And in a lot of industries, they feel that the pace of change is either very fast or very slow. And in technology-based businesses, it's fast. In the construction industry and other professional categories, it's slow. So the idea of saying to someone, you need to start thinking about being more self-aware. And I'm going to introduce another word for us to react to. And that is this whole notion of the fact that human beings have, for every moment that they breathe, and particularly their waking hours, they are experiencing feelings, emotions. What sayest you about feelings and emotions, Glodean Champion?
And then the fear comes back. People don't even like to feel some kind of way, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I always laugh when have you seen that show Man versus Bee? It's on Netflix. It's Rowan Atkinson. He was Mr. Bean.
I'll put it on my watch list. Man versus
Bee. And I bring it up because anybody that's watched Mr. Bean knows it's kind of slapstickish. But the thing about this particular show is this man is in this multi-million-dollar home with a dog, a cat, and a bee. And he's focused on the bee, and he can't just let the bee be in the house. Right, exactly. And so I've watched this movie intentionally with different people that I know have like created this persona that they're always serious and, you know, they don't like slapstick. And I do it to make them relax. Like all of that is a weight. You know, if you've created this persona that you're cooler than ice and things like that aren't funny, then what are you missing out on? You know what I mean? Like, if you have children and you can't laugh at slapstick, and 90% of what kids do is slapstickish, especially if they have siblings. I mean, I grew up by myself, but I did all kind of nonsense as if I had siblings that was completely slapstick. You know, if my mother didn't have a sense of humor, she would have been mad at me a lot. A lot.
No, not you.
I mean, I used to take the radio apart and anyway, all sorts of things. But I have people that I know are super serious watch that show because they can't help laughing.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is like, if you can laugh and you can tap into that emotion, then you can tap into the other emotions, right? Again, though, we go back to fear. Fear is the emotion that people are more comfortable with because it protects them from what's uncomfortable. And I think that we need to start getting comfortable being uncomfortable because there's power in that. Like, again, you know, when I use myself as an example, if I'm afraid to do something, that's the thing I have to do because I'm not going to live my life through fear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's our friend Mr. Farber's used the word audacious.
Yeah.
You know, there is no box. We just we just have to move forward.
No box.
You know, one of the other things that I talk about quite a bit, and this will take us towards the end of our conversation, which actually could go on for another 3 or 4 hours without any effort whatsoever, is this notion that if we think about who we are as people, and we stop and simply describe each other as people, as persons, as individuals. Mm-hmm. And we don't go any further than that because that is those are common terms. But you know, one of the problems that exists is that there is another common idea that is difficult for some people to embrace, let alone understand the importance of, and that is that it is in fact differences that are the most significant thing that every human being has in common with every other human being.
And also what makes us unique.
Yeah. So why do we continue to have to be talking about things? And that's, you know, 2 of the hours that you participated in the Soft as Steel Summit back in February were entitled Inclusion and Social Justice.
Yeah.
And this is an evergreen podcast. So what do we say today? And part 2 would be, what would you hope or pray we might say a few years from now about this notion of differences?
I would say that we have been conditioned to focus on those things, especially race. I mean, race isn't even real. There's the human race. I saw this on a t-shirt once. It's there's just one race, human. Everything else is culture. And I believe that. Everything else is culture. Even our difference, even the things that make us different are associated with who we are culturally. And I wouldn't have had that understanding had I not been in Ghana. Like, Black people are colorful. I mean, I was in 3 different parts of Africa, and we are colorful and we are bold and outspoken, and all of those things are part of what makes us unique collectively, but individually where there's other things that make us different, right? So let's take, if we took race off the table and we just looked at people, and I bring up Black because obviously this country has been designed on Black versus white. When you hear statistics, it's always Black versus white, as if there is no other culture in this country. But if people could just recognize that individually, how we're made up, there's something about each one of us that connects us to each other. which is, and if shameless plug here, which is why I partnered with Tilt, because when you take personality assessments, and especially when you take personality assessments in the workplace, there's no box that says I'm black or I'm white or I'm anything else or I'm male or I'm female. It's about your makeup, how you are individually constructed, right? So what if for a moment, and then the distinction between Tilt is that personality puts you in a box and makes you a type. Tilt has you focus on your character. And character is something that we get to choose from day to day, moment to moment, how we want to show up in a situation, right? None of that has to do with our differences. It's when we put that on top of it. So I would say for right now, helping people understand that is where I would like this conversation. This is the way I teach the DEI. It's really, and I can't believe that I have talked to prospective customers who didn't know what to do with me telling them that I take race out of the conversation long enough to build a meaningful connection. Because I think that those companies are focused on checking a box. And when you're checking a box, then you're doing the things that they say you have to learn. But in my mind, you can't. I refuse to teach systemic racism or bias or unconscious bias. I refuse to teach any of that until I can help people connect with each other in a real way. And that real way is understanding how we're wired, right? Because what works for you may not work for me. So if we're sitting in a class together and you have to ask questions because you need time to think about what you're going to say before you say it, and I ask maybe one question and I rattle off an answer, that doesn't mean I'm smarter than you or that you're smarter than me because you're taking more time. It's because you need to process information differently than I do. That's the only thing that makes us different, right? It just in the future, I would just like it to be where people see each other and the thing that connects us. And again, I can't help going back to my cross-country trip. The question was, is there more that connects us than separates us? And everybody said yes. And so if that is the case, wouldn't it be great if we could just focus on the things that connect us and stop making people's behavior about our difference and more, again, back to the self-awareness thing, more about helping them understand how they're showing up and us not taking. Maya Angelou once said, if you don't pick it up, you don't have to put it back down. So if you don't pick up what somebody else is throwing at you, then you don't have to put it back down and they have to deal with it. And you can keep on going down the road in your happy place, so to speak. I feel like we should all be happy most of the time. I mean, life happens, but even in the space of bad things happening, there is always something good that comes on the other side of that. And I can tell you from experience, even losing my mother, like I thought I was never gonna come back from that. It took me a long time to get through it. But what I recognize is that what took me so long to get through it is because I was so focused on what I'd lost instead of being focused on what I'd gained. I mean, I had my mother for 29 years. She instilled a lot in me. She helped me become the woman that I am, but I couldn't see that until I was almost 40. So we're talking, 11 years for me to even wrap my brain around, what I gained instead of what I'd lost. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does.
I was like, did I go around in a circle just now?
No, it does make sense. So, Glodean, your thoughts are to reconnect to the construction industry. Your thoughts are thoughts that people can build upon.
Yes.
And so I appreciate those thoughts. This conversation has been way too short, but there you have it. Where can people find you if they want to connect? If they'd like to connect with you?
Well, I can be found on GlodeanChampion.com, or on social media would be LinkedIn, preferably, just because it's LinkedIn and it's different.
Because it's LinkedIn.
I mean, just, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram, but I feel like my purpose in life is happening on LinkedIn. Does it make sense?
Yes, and I would agree with that. Thank you so much for your time. It's been
Thank you.
a delight, and I'm glad you liked the sledgehammer reference.
I did. That was great.
Thank you so much. My
Thanks,
very
Dennis.
best. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today for this episode of the Soft as Steel podcast with your host, Dennis Duran. Dennis is the author of Soft as Steel and a leading speaker and trainer for organizations across many industries and verticals. To learn more about the work Dennis is doing to activate soft skills in the workplace, contact him at DennisDuranSpeaking.com. Be sure to check out his book, Soft as Steel, on Amazon or wherever books are sold. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or wherever you'd like to get your podcasts. And please remember to share this episode with your friends, colleagues, and anyone you feel would benefit from the conversation. We'll see you next time on the Soft as Steel podcast with Dennis Duran.